Welcome back to Go to Master Show Finance Fireside podcast, where we converse with finance leaders from some of the fastest growing businesses out there and bring you out what they've learned through their experience. Joining us today is Josh Rappaport, VP Finance at Acumatica. Thank you for being here today, Josh. Could you please share a little bit about yourself with our listeners?
Of course, my pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. So my background is a little bit varied, but tends to anchor on finance and finance related roles. Started my career as an investor actually in private equity and venture capital. I learned to love being an operator, and for the last too many years, for the last 20 or so years, have been in operating roles both in finance and in product and in strategy at mega tech companies like Microsoft and startups like Bilgo and now at which is an incredible ERP platform growing really nicely, and frankly has been perhaps the pinnacle of my career.
Josh, you've gone from investment roles to leading finance at Acumatica. What drew you towards operational finance, and how has working across B2B SaaS, fintech, and online media shaped your approach to partnering with GTM teams?
Sure. I think what drives me is curiosity. I seek to understand. And so there is a thread that goes through both in being an investor and an operator, that is this idea of wanting to learn and wanting to understand how things work. So as an investor, thinking more big picture, what are industry dynamics? What are broad technology dynamics that would influence a particular type of business? But then, diving a layer deeper into operating companies, it's really about asking questions and understanding how does the business work in more granular detail. How does sales and marketing interact with product and engineering, which interacts with finance and strategy and people ops, et cetera. And so for me, it really, the context is different. It's really the same theme of wanting to ask questions, wanting to learn, and then being able to apply that knowledge and those takeaways to your specific domain. And so more recently, as an operator, and in particular with go-to-market, I've had kind of experience with different go-to-market strategies as well. So my last three companies have all been very, very different. Bilgo was really a B2B2C type company where we were selling to massively large financial institutions, and the go-to-market there's 3 to 5 year sales cycles. Very, very different than RTM, which is really a consumer-oriented business where the go-to-market was really PLG. There was no sales force per se. We operated and we grew largely through word of mouth because the product was fantastic. And then now at Acumatica, a more traditional enterprise sales model, but also a bit different than what you would assume because our go-to-market is solely through the channel. We don't have a direct sales force, and so understanding how that channel-enabled go-to-market works is a little bit different than you would assume. And so for me, it's not take a learning and apply it, rinse, repeat, keep doing the same thing over and over again. It's learn how each of those modalities work, and then what can we do to make those the most efficient and effective as we can.
Curiosity, that's a big lever. At Bilgo, you built finance ops from the ground up. What were some recurring issues you saw in the revenue cycle? And how did you work with other teams to close cash gaps or stop revenue leaks, which is pretty hard? So I'm just curious.
It is. And look, I was fortunate. Bilgo, we didn't really have those challenges. Again, we had 10, 12 customers total, but they were extraordinarily large. And so the challenge there is actually, almost the pre-work, so to speak, ensuring that our product and our offerings were right for the customer, ensuring that each deal, so to speak, because each customer, these were bespoke deals that we had with them, and so ensuring that we both negotiated and structured the right relationships with our customers. And then fintech. So ultimately, the product is moving money from one place to another. And so ensuring that we had operationally really well fortified processes, and that our flow of funds were correct, and I'll say correct in quotes, both from a regulatory and compliance standpoint, but also from a revenue generation or capture standpoint, so that we didn't have leakage, so that we didn't really need to worry about where we're going to get paid or not. It was really baked into the way the product worked. And then AirTM, a different scenario. We weren't necessarily collecting money from our customers directly. So different challenges altogether. And now here at Acumatica, really working very, very closely both with our sales, our customer success, and our partner account managers to then work with our value-added resellers, partners, to ensure that they ultimately are working with their customers well, to ensure that we are all able to secure the revenue that we're entitled to, so to speak. And so again, it gets back to, like, there's no cookie cutter, no one solution fits all scenario. It comes back to understanding what are the individual challenges of any given company or product, and focusing in on the small things that make them incrementally better.
There's no one size fit all, but you also ensure nothing breaks, and that's not easy.
Of
You
course.
focused, yeah, you're focused on scaling finance teams while keeping speed. How do you maintain process integrity when growth teams want to move fast? And what tells you it's time to bring in automation or structure, which is crucial?
I think there's a false belief that structure and process equals slow. In fact, I'll argue the exact opposite. Structure and process enable speed. And so, especially in earlier stage companies, you tend to get a lot of pushback. Like, whether it's the sales team or the marketing or engineering or product, whatnot, I just want to do what I want to do. I need, in particular, like finance or RevOps or whatnot, to get out of my way. You're slowing me down. And the reality is, without structure and without process, every single activity becomes a decision. And every decision has its own cognitive load. And so if I've got a marketer who's worried about, can I spend that next $100 on, Google AdWords? They're spending time thinking about, is it okay? Should I? Is it $100? I have $150. Oh, let me go ask Josh, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas, when you have, let's say, what's the ultimate process in a business is your budget or your planning. If I have a budget, if I've clearly articulated what are the guardrails within which my teams can operate, it takes away from that, that cognitive load, that overthinking every decision, because you already know, what your bounds are. And so instead of worrying about, can I do this? Operators and my business partners can worry about, how do I do this, and how do I do this more quickly and more effectively and more efficiently. Um, so over, that's a high level answer to your question. But I think more practically, um, when you find that you're spending more time in spreadsheets and auditing formulas and outputs, and wondering, do we get our sales commission right, or hey, didn't we change that structure 2 quarters ago, but we didn't update the spreadsheet, or are we sure that the data that somebody's entering and probably cutting and pasting or whatnot, it is correct? Like, when you're spending more time doing that than actually worrying about the customer, who's ultimately going to drive your business, or worrying about how we are, growing our motion or changing our motion, or et cetera. That's when you know that tools and automation are probably, in your best interest. Because if we can automate that manual load, if we can automate away the chance for error, frankly, that's when you're really going to be able to accelerate growth and accelerate operational excellence.
That's a solid take, Josh. Without structure and process, every act becomes a decision, and that's a lot of overall as well. Uh, you handle negotiations both externally and internally, right? And it's about dealing with people. And how do you approach negotiations to protect margins while keeping GTM velocity? And are there any principles you always rely on?
Yeah, it's interesting that you use that term because my number one principle is that you focus on the principles, which is, you don't necessarily, you always have an outcome in mind, right? And you have an outcome that you're trying to achieve. But when you try to negotiate a specific outcome, it often becomes an adversarial, it's a fixed pie. In order for me to win, you have to lose kind of negotiation. And so what I try to do in negotiations is I try to align on principles. So I'm in a negotiation right now where, the principle that we've aligned on is really equitability. That ultimately at the end of the day, when all the structure is done and we negotiate all the fine points and we do all the math, the goal is that the outcome is financially equitable for both parties. And so that guiding principle has helped us, stop, focusing on the, a couple percentage points here or there, and really thinking about the big picture about where's all the value. So I like to think, I like to, again, I align on principles. If your principles are aligned, your outcomes will be aligned. And if you agree with the principles, the outcomes of those, the outcomes of that, effectively that algorithm, really can't be denied nor argued against. And so that's generally how I like to approach things. But more importantly, like, you really need to understand going into a negotiation what it is that you're trying to achieve and where is the value that you're trying to create. And hopefully, a good negotiation creates value for both parties. And frankly, neither party is, kind of common wisdom. Neither party coming out of it is 100% happy with, with the outcome. You're both giving a little bit because you know that you're both getting more in return.
Absolutely.
The
Equitability
one
seems
last
to
thing,
be
it strikes
uh,
me. One last thing, especially in terms of speed to, and GDM velocity with negotiations. One thing I've done, not as necessarily as a primary negotiator, but in supporting my business partners, is I'd like to create what I generally refer to as like enablement tools. So when I was at Microsoft, I worked with a product leader and we negotiated hundreds of content acquisition deals. So this is for MSN at the time, and I created, in effect, it was a spreadsheet. It's relatively simple. We're not talking rocket science here, but that laid out what are the variables in a deal and what are the constraints, and very easily allowed our strategic partnerships team to go out and talk to hundreds of potential partners and at their fingertips be able to key in very readily, like, here are the specifics of the terms and here's what the outcome of, at least financially, here's the outcome of what that deal, what we would expect from that deal, and does it or does it not fit within, again, those guardrails that we set going forward. So just creating tools that are easy to use, that are repeatable, again, creating structure and process allows that velocity, allows people to move much more quickly. And so that, I gave you my intellectual view and then the more practical view of things here.
both of them helps for sure. Uh, Seems like the spine of negotiation is equitability or the principle that you go ahead with. At Bilgo, you helped navigate a tough post-COVID climate. In times of uncertainty, what should finance leaders prioritize most? And are there
People.
lessons from the period you still apply today?
Yeah, I mean, it's super easy. In difficult times, I prioritize people. I prioritize my team. I prioritize my peers. I prioritize our customers. Because ultimately I think kind of that's where you show up as a true leader. COVID was really tough, I think, for lots and lots of people, and being able to just empathize with the uncertainty, the fright, frankly. Um, on all accounts, whether it's, I remember early, like March 2020, like I kind of joke now. It's like, we were afraid to leave the house. You might have breathed something and spontaneously combust. It was a completely irrational fear. Um, but, but that has a real impact on people and has a real impact on their decision making and whether or not it can effectively move a business forward as well. And so, first and foremost, caring for, people's mindsets, people's, understanding kind of their perspective, understanding their fears, understanding their excitement and opportunities as well. I think ultimately serves, not to be too grandiose, but serves the greater good and ultimately helps us reach our goals as a business. And that you can say the same thing for your customers. In uncertain times, I want to be there, and I want to be working with teams and companies that are going to help them feel more comfortable with uncertainty. So we look today in the economic environment, the broad macro environment, whether it's tariffs or armed conflict or whatnot, the uncertainty in the economy today, at Acumatica, we believe that our products help our customers gain both comfort and more certainty because it helps them understand all the components of their business and how they're working together. And so we're providing that comfort, that understanding in a world of uncertainty. And so we're enabling our incredible customers who are very broad based in terms of what they do. It could be manufacturing, construction, distribution, consumer products, business products, et cetera. We're giving them that certainty, that comfort level, or our products are enabling that certainty and comfort level in a world of uncertainty.
It's not always numbers, prioritizing people and keeping empathy first. That's golden, Josh.
So I joke, but I don't think it's really a joke. I say finance is 20% math and 80% psychology. And I believe that. It's a cute little quip, but I really do believe that whether you're working with your business partners, helping influence them, helping them make good decisions, that's psychology right there. Whether it's team leadership, whether it's working with your customers or your partners, or perhaps competing against your adversaries. The math part of finance, frankly, is easy. We're probably not doing anything more complex than algebra. But the psychology of it all and how you relay information, how you anticipate fears, challenges, excitement, etc. And I think that's the secret sauce.
I'm sure that's a great takeaway for a lot of finance leaders, managers, and even analysts for that matter from today's podcast on that. With AI, I'm sure you're anticipating this question. With AI transforming finance workflows, what excites you the most across FP&A, treasury, or people operations? Where do you think the biggest short-term wins or long-term shifts will show up, especially with some sensitive data where finance is handling?
So, I struggle with this one a little bit, and I've been spending a lot of time recently thinking through it. There are a lot of headline grabbing statements, let's say, recently about AI and in particular how it will impact the finance function and finance roles going forward. I think certainly to start, AI will have a large impact on financial operations, whether it's improving and automating AR efficiency, accounts payable, anomaly detection, driving efficiency in invoice to cash, or other areas of financial operations. The true mechanics of the business, I think, will all be quickly impacted by AI. And quickly though, like maybe I have a different measure or quickness. I don't think it's the next 3 months the whole world changes on us, but I think over the next 3 years, most certainly we're going to get much deeper into automation and driving efficiency, which means frankly probably fewer resources in those areas. That said, automation is only as good at it. Let me take that back. Automation is a tool. AI is a tool. And so I actually wish I knew who to attribute this statement to, but I read it recently, and forgive me. If you said this, reach out, please, because I want to talk to you anyway. But I read something recently, or where somebody wrote, referring to AI as a tool, made the metaphor of like AI being like an axe, and he said, I'd rather strengthen my shoulders than sharpen my axe. Um, and the meaning behind that was really like, tools will develop. We will get better, bigger, sharper tools over time. If we don't have the muscle, or in our case, the intellect, the insight, the instinct, the judgment to wield those tools, sure, we can see some improvements up front. But eventually, if I can't pick up that sharp axe, I can't use it to chop that wood. I'm going in and out of this metaphor. Forgive me. But that so what I continue to focus on is the thought process, is the intellect of it. If you understand what questions to ask, if you understand and have the judgment to, let's say, see some data and go, hey, that just doesn't feel right. Let me double click into that. Let me take a look there. If you have that muscle, if you have that the brain power, so to speak, then you'll be able to take full advantage of that sharper apps, of those advancing tools. And so one doesn't work entirely without the other. And so my fear in this focus on AI, which is certainly probably going to prove out to be the, in broad terms, the most impactful technological advance in at least my lifetime. If we just focus on the tools and the technology as opposed to the people, and developing that muscle, developing the insight, developing the understanding, we're gonna miss the opportunity, and perhaps uh, create more error. It could actually be detrimental versus beneficial. So we can't lose sight of, how do we train folks? How do we give them opportunities to learn? How do we also like bring folks into finance who have, that mentality? Again, it's not just about math. How do we bring folks into finance that really want to and are able to understand the deeply complex systems that are businesses?
Three key pieces of advice you would like to share with our listeners who aspire to excel in the field of finance, Josh.
So less of advice and more of something that I love. My favorite answer to any question, and ask my team, I tell them this all the time. My favorite answer to any question is, I don't know. And here's why. First of all, it portrays humility. To be able to admit that you don't know something is actually quite difficult, especially in our kind of somewhat ego-driven world that we live in. But it also portrays a willingness both to kind of accept where we are individually, but a willingness to kind of almost ask for help. And so I don't know, for me, is not the end of the journey. In fact, it's very much the beginning. So really, my favorite answer is not just I don't know, is I don't know. Could you help me understand, or how should we think about this, or how can we know? So my favorite answer, again, I don't know. And I think what that really portrays is being curious, being open, always wanting to learn. Because again, finance isn't about the spreadsheet or the number. It's really about, what that spreadsheet or those numbers are an abstraction of, which is activity. It's in our case business activity, either in the past if we're reporting, or the present, or the future if we're planning. And so being able to say that I don't know opens the door to really being able to understand what is that activity behind all the numbers that us finance folks deal with every day. I also align to this. I'm probably the rare finance person that when my team or my business partners sit down and we're talking about something, I don't want to start with numbers. I want to understand that activity, and I want you to be able to describe what it is either that you're struggling with or happy about or asking about or this, that, and the other in words, not in numbers. And so I think it's really important for finance folks to be able to speak that language. While certainly the language of business could be seen as financial, each one of our business partners have their own languages, whether it's, marketing language or engineering language or people ops or et cetera. And so being multilingual in finance is really, really important. I like to tell my teams, we have this privileged perch when we're in finance. We sit in the middle of everything. We get to see everything. We get to interact with everything. But in return for that privileged perch, we have a responsibility, and that responsibility is to be that translator, that universal translator, that Rosetta Stone of the business. Not only to understand a specific business partner's language, but to understand every business partner's language and to help them speak with one another and understand one another. So, always being willing to admit what you don't know, but to ask the questions to then learn. Being able to understand and speak multiple languages, really being able to empathize with your business partners, I think is incredibly important. And then lastly, I think it's really important for finance folks to learn how to be consistent. So we are looked upon in our business as somewhat charting the course. And look, there are going to be calm seas and choppy seas. I'm using another metaphor. But through that all, we need to be consistent. If the finance organization, in particular the finance leaders who are at a very, very high level setting kind of the financial goals and business outcomes that we're trying to achieve, if we're all over the place, if we keep changing our minds, if we portray uncertainty even when we're not certain, that is detrimental in the business. And so we need to be consistent. And that's not to say we don't change our minds, we don't learn more. In fact, again, I don't know the ultimate the first person to say this, but I know Fred Wilson from Unit Square Ventures says this quite a bit, and that's who I heard it from first. Is he said, I have strong opinions loosely held, and I believe that. Like, well, how strong opinions? But as we take in more information, certainly we can evolve our points of view, evolve our opinions, but we don't want to just have wild swings from one to another, because that ultimately will cause chaos and make it that much harder for your business to succeed. So saying I don't know, being able to tell that story of the activity, not just in numbers, but in words, and that consistency, without excluding evolution of thought, but that consistency of thought, I think, are all super, super important for kind of modern day finance leaders.
Vulnerability, knowing business context and talking business context, and keeping it consistent. Great takeaways, Josh. Well, that brings us to the end of this insightful episode of Go to Masters. Big thanks to Josh for sharing his experiences and valuable insights. Remember, you can tune in every week to learn more from game changers driving hypergrowth companies across the globe. Go to Masters is brought to you by Everstage, your trusted partner for transforming the way businesses handle sales commissions. I'm your host, signing off.